It is said that true strength comes from struggle, and that the hardest of battles are sometimes given to the toughest of soldiers. When I was in Standard 9, and now I'm really giving away my age, because in these days we don't use standards, right? We use grades. So when I was in Standard 9, I wrote a speech for a classroom project entitled My Personal Dreams. I dreamt of traveling the world. I dreamt of visiting locations like Paris, Rome, Switzerland. But also, like every young girl, I dreamt of just having a good marriage, having a family, and having children, of course. 26 years ago, my dream started becoming a reality when I fell in love, and I met and I married my best friend and confidant. Little did I know at that time that he was going to become the pillar of my strength and support in my life, my amazing husband, Rashid. And so my story unfolds. After being married for 18 months, our first son, Nurullah, was born. As he was born, I remembered in my speech, as many of you might know, that as you dream in personal dreams, I also had fears in my personal dreams. And one of the things I dreamt about was having children, holding my child to my bosom and knowing that this child is mine. But in the very next paragraph, I went on, surprisingly, at the age of 15, to talk about my fear of having to lose a child, the pain that I might feel if I had to lose a child. Ladies and gents, my fear at that moment in time was becoming real. Doctors diagnosed my son with an extremely rare condition called lissencephaly, a condition where the brain remains smooth, where it had no folds or grooves. You see, you and I, if we had a brain scan taken, we would see that we have folds and grooves, and it looks like a walnut shape. His brain on the outside was completely smooth. The disease impacts his neural and mental development. You see, at that moment in time, we did not know what we did not know. The loss indeed seemed real. It was then the doctor sat us down and they said, he will not live a normal life. He will not be able to sit, eat, walk, or even talk. They even said that he might not even be able to smile. At that moment in time, I felt like the floor of the world was just falling apart. And I looked at the doctor, and his last statement was, and Hawa, there is a possibility that he will not live till 2. It was at that moment in time that I knew that this was it. This was probably the dream that I was having all this particular moment in time. The pain of watching him in and out of hospitals, going to see doctors, pricks and pokes for more tests because they did not know much about the condition, since seeing it was such a rare condition. And watching him through that was painful. And then, of course, the small things started to matter. His first smile at 8 months. Something, by the way, the doctor said he will never be able to do. His first laughter out loud at 10 months. His awareness when we were around as parents, and his frown when we returned, if we had to go anywhere. Does that look like a face that is not able to show emotion? No. These were the moments that kept us going. These were the moments that we cherished. My husband and I, Rashid, sat and watched him at night, hoping that he would wake up and say, Mom, Dad, I'm hungry, feed me. Mom, Dad, I love you. And although he never said that in his own way, he never said that as what we as normal people do, he said it in his own particular way. And that again gave us hope and gave us courage. Well, we found that at that moment in time, the moment we got the courage, we also found that it was time to say goodbye to him, because sadly, in 1996, September, my son Nurullah, 3 months before his birthday, passed on. Just when I started having hope that he was getting better, he passed on. You see, I also felt trepidation, I felt anger, I felt frustration. At that moment in time, as much as I want to tell you that I had hope, I had comfort, but the instinctive function of a mother sometimes failed me. I was frustrated, There was anger, and not only that, there was even guilt that I was living with, because at that moment in time, we went for genetic counseling because I needed to know more. I needed to find more. And through genetic counseling, I found that I was the carrier of a gene that I would pass down to my children. I later looked at the doctor and I said, what are my chances for the future? And he smiled and he said, Hawa, you have a 50% chance of having a perfectly healthy and normal child. And for me, ladies and gents, I don't know about you, but for me, 50%, wow, that was amazing. And I was definitely going to give it a shot. So 3 years later, after losing our son, I fell pregnant again, and I had my second daughter, baby Batul. She had the most amazing eyelashes, long. She had green eyes, the only grandchild out of 26 grandchildren that had my mom's eyes, which was pure green eyes. And I looked into her eyes and I knew that she was okay. And it wasn't until a month later that the doctors came and said, Hawa, we've run some tests. And I'm sorry to say, she has the same condition called lissencephaly. The odds were against us, ladies and gents, because 4 years later, I gave birth to my third child, Mohammed Awais, my amazing son. Can you see the amazing smile and the amazing eyes? But here's the thing, both these children defied what logic says through the medical profession. If you look at my daughter Batul, she lived until the age of 8, and my son Mohammed Awais lived until the age of 7. Both of them, yes, had the same condition. Both of them, doctors said they will not be able to sit, walk, talk, or even smile. Looking at those children, for me, there was much more. It was then that I realized that I had a bigger purpose. There was something more in life that I was chosen for. I asked numerous questions. Why me? I asked it over and over again, and my best friend Rashid turned to me and he said, Hawa, why not you? What makes you so special? Do you wish this on your neighbor? Do you wish this on your brother or your sister? Do you wish this on anyone else? And I said, no. And he looked at me and he said, why not us? What are we supposed to learn and develop from this? And that got me to start thinking. You see, before our children were actually labeled with certain conditions, like in my case, labeled with lissencephaly and told and put down with an expiry date that they will not live till 2. In some of your cases, some of you know of children that have cerebral palsy. All these big names, pulmonary hypertension, Down syndrome, autistic, and the new one now in all over the world, ADHD. A label that has been placed on these children and being told what they can do and what they can't do. The one thing we have forgotten is that before we have these big names, which by the way, I wish I had one of those fancy names under my name, because it sounds fancy, doesn't it? And before we knew this, they are first children. They are first and foremost children that just needs to be loved and hugged and touched and have human connection. And that is something that even I, as a parent, have forgotten. I tell you of a story where were times we used to walk into malls or we would go to events. Rashid with one wheelchair, I'm with the other wheelchair. On Batul's wheelchair, she had because she was breathing, her lungs were collapsing, she had an oxygen tank next to her wheelchair. And my son, Mohammed Awais, had a gastrostomy tube out of his tummy because he could not taste food as he would aspirate the food into his lungs, and that would cause an infection in his lungs. We'd walk around, and I was very content and happy because I loved them for who they were. And they would show excitement by their hands and by their legs, and they would kick and they would jump. And as children would approach them and wanting to, just out of curiosity, come and see what is all this and come and touch them, and they would light up and get all excited. And then an adult would come up to them and look at them and say, don't touch. They are sick. And at that moment in time, I would see the drop in the face of my children's eyes. And when that would actually happen, we would actually find that people are disconnected from our children and we're not allowing ourselves to learn. And therefore, for me, the loss was truly, truly real. We'd be sitting into a movie and my son Mohammed Awais would have a deviated septum. So he would breathe with a very high intensity. We would choose seats right at the back so that I could put him into the wheelchair and he would breathe. And as he would breathe, people around would turn and say, keep him quiet, shh. And I would say, I'm sorry, but I can't, he's sick. And then they would say, so why is he here? The question I asked that day was, do we own a space where only we believe that in this space, this is what normal actually is? And if this is normal, then I'm sorry, we've lost the plot somewhere. It was at those moments in time that my husband, Rashid, did a lot of research, and he mentioned something to me, which I've included into the speech here today, and that is that it is said that the energy that is generated from the flapping of the wings of the butterfly, although insignificant to you and I, is extremely essential and vital for this universe to exist. In fact, the reason you are sitting here and I'm sitting here today is because the energy that we're supposed to share in this universe is also essential and vital right now. It's the reason we haven't left yet. We are still here. You see, my children, even though they could not sit, walk, talk, or even make sounds at certain points, although we may find that just like the butterfly, that is so insignificant, that energy that they were here to share with us is extremely vital and important to this universe in order for that while they were here. They came, they shared their energy, and then they left. You see, they had an agreement to be here respectively for the times that they were here, respectively for 21 months, 7 years, and 8 years respectively. When they arrived and they came into this world, I have learned many lessons from these children. One of which, one day we were actually walking into, driving on holiday, and my son was seated at the back seat in his car seat, my very first son, Nurullah. And as he was seated there, my husband stopped, filled up at a petrol station, and the petrol attendant didn't close the bonnet correctly. And when he drove off, my son started crying profusely, couldn't stop. I turned to look at him, tried to calm him down. Eventually, Rashid stopped the car, got out, walked around the car, and he saw that the bonnet was open, closed it, and immediately this child stopped, and there was a smile. You see, the question is that we look at these children to look at what is normal in our life. But there were certain things that these children could do which is not normal for us. We would never be able to feel that. They had a sixth sense in my life and was a guardian angel for me. That was the learning I needed to learn from these children. I share with you a very close story to my heart. It was one of my last learnings that I learned on my journey with my children. It was in the last stages of my son, Mohammed Awais, my last son in his life. His heart was failing, his lungs were collapsing. He was 7 years old, and it was only 2 days before his birthday. He was admitted in ICU, and both my husband and I were sitting next to his bedside, comforting him, because I knew that there was hope, because every time he got admitted in hospital, we knew we were taking him back home. There was always hope because he always came out of the worst situations. And as we were sitting next to him, those of you who have been with loved ones in hospitals will know that sound of a beeping machine when it goes. And that's what I heard. I just heard the beeping sound. And suddenly the nurses came running and pushed us aside, and the doctor started resussing. And in that moment that they were resussing him, I realized that this might be the last time that I will hold him in my arms. And I knew I would not be able to live with that. The doctor gave me one look, and he said, "Hawa, I'm sorry, he's gone." It was at that moment in time that all logic failed. I walked up to my son, held on to his feet. His tiny little feet, although he was 7 years old, those tiny little feet fitted into the palm of my hands. And I said to him, "You cannot leave me. I need you. This is not about you. You are being selfish. You cannot go." The doctor gave me one look, started resussing again, and within a minute, his heartbeat was back. It was at that moment in time the doctor called my husband aside with 2 very close family members and said to them, "He is failing, but he's holding on. You need to have a word with your wife." I then went and I sat next to his bed, because that is when I realized human connectivity that we have discarded from our children all this time, they had more than I would ever have in my life. It was then that I realized that he was holding on not for himself. He was holding on for my sense. I have learned that day of being selfless. That's the energy that child came in past. And I had a word with him for almost 3 hours, a long conversation. They said he might not be able to hear me, but I knew he did. Because as I told him, I will be okay. I will be fine. You have taught me so much. It is now your turn to go and share your energy elsewhere. And I now have found my purpose in life. Within few hours, he calmly, peacefully closed his eyes with a smile and left us for good. In that moment in time, ladies and gents, I have learned the biggest lessons of my life. I have learned the true fragility of just being human by holding him in my arms and knowing that even when he has a seizure or an epileptic fit, it reminded me of the fragility of being human. When they had their special quirks and their special sounds, it reminded me of just sharing their energy, because in that too there was benefit. The question I ask every single person in this room and everyone else, how many of us have learned to connect with anything that we feel is different? Our own children that we believe are normal, and I put that very much in inverted commas because I don't know what's normal any longer, ladies and gents. Have we learned to identify even our healthy and normal children and learn to understand them, step into their world, remove the mask, and get into their world to understand who or what they are here to be able to deliver? Because if we don't, ladies and gents, then that loss is truly, truly real, not the loss of the physical loss of our children. What are you learning from these special angels in this world? Thank you.